Welcome to Beyond the Work, Tales in Multifamily Maintenance. My name is Chris Caramanica. As a 15-plus year veteran in the apartment industry, I have stories to tell, and desire to hear and tell others' stories. As a multiple committee member for NAA, a CAMT advisory board member and a CAMT holder, and a national presenter and educator, I have met and worked with so many great people in our industry at all different levels. This is not going to be a how-to podcast. This is going to be a how-did podcast. We are going to explore the how-did tales in multifamily maintenance. How did we do it? How did we learn from it? How did we grow? How did we decide not to do it again? Join me as we go beyond the work. As well as some of the challenges that we're seeing in the industry when it comes to those properties, their acquisitions, their rehabs, as well as new construction. It's a great conversation. So without further ado, let's get to Angie. Angie Drysdale, thank you so much for joining me today on Beyond the Work, Tales in Multifamily Maintenance.
I'm honored to be here, Chris. I thank you for the invite.
So I know a little bit about you. You and I actually have talked on several occasions. But for my listening audience, who is Angie Drysdale? What are you currently doing? Where'd you come from?
Well, I am currently in Kansas City, Missouri. I'm a regional maintenance director with Willow Bridge Property Company, aka Lincoln, used to be Lincoln Property Company. And I've been in the industry for a very long time, 26 plus years, as you can tell from my gray hair. And I got into this industry like most everyone else. It's always by accident. Nobody intends to, I'm going to have a career in the apartment industry. I wish they would now that we're struggling.
Right.
But, I was doing some construction, building bridges in Kansas City with a major highway and bridge developer for interstates and the city. And it was a very harsh winter, so we're off, you're collecting unemployment. And a friend said, oh, you should come work with me. We have a make-ready tech position open. And so that's how I fell into the industry. I went working, and it was just, it can be stressful, but it really is a gratifying feeling knowing that you are taking care of people's homes,
So you went from a commercial construction background,
yeah,
where there was instability, where there was weather dependency, into a much more secure role. And you
yeah.
said, I'm sorry, 26 years?
Yeah, 26. Yep.
Wow.
The very early 90s. So, I went to college for civil engineering. It was very difficult as a female to get a job in that time period, the late 80s, early 90s, with any engineering firm at that time. So I got a job with, like I said, Clarkson Construction at the time, and, worked through that, building bridges with them, and then ended up in the multifamily industry and haven't really looked back. So I did go into the military, so I'm a U.S. Army veteran. So I could get money to go to college. That's who paid for my college, and I'm very thankful for that. And it was a great experience. But yeah, that's how I got here.
So you were a civil engineer by trade?
I was going to college, and I ended up here. Yeah.
Okay.
That's
So
what I wanted to be.
that's what you wanted to be. Got
Yes.
it. Um, as a woman in facilities, there's, I have had the honor and privilege of working with several maintenance supervisors over the years. I've gotten to work with and hire several maintenance supervisors at my organization that were females. Um, but when you started as a make-ready technician,
Hmm.
what kind of challenges did you have, and especially in your role now,
Yeah.
what kind of
Well,
challenges do you have as a woman in this
it's a
industry?
lot more accepting now. You'll see it's still, you know, of the minorities, it's still the smallest, right? Group compared to Hispanic or African Americans. As far as personnel that are in the maintenance
Hmm.
industry in the multifamily, right? But in the 90s, it was so different. It was so, I would have people stand behind me just to go into their apartment to, plunge a toilet or fix a toilet or diagnose. And they just, would be shocked. And sometimes some negative things were said,
Yeah.
you know, um, to me about being the female, being in there fixing something. But, from a very young age, I wanted to know how things work. I was the child that you never left in a room by herself because, I would take stuff apart and not be able to
Yeah.
put it back together. Yeah. Yeah. I paid my poor parents. That's all I can say is I just wanted, this huge Wi-Fi stereo. My sister's my keeper, right? Latchkey kids, she's 4 years older than I am. And, she would be sitting out back with a boyfriend. I'm like, oh, I'm going to take this stereo apart, see how it works. I want to know what's inside.
I
So,
think
yeah.
I think we all go through that. I mean, I still go through that to this day. I have just learned when I take something
Right.
apart, label where the screws
Yeah.
were, take a
Right.
picture of it before I
Yes.
start taking it apart. But
Yeah.
back in the 90s, we didn't have the benefit of a camera phone where we could take a
Yeah.
picture of
Yeah.
something.
So that was when, when I was a kid. And then, so I was destined to always do something where I was
Yeah.
fixing or repairing or building or something, so.
So what was your journey like from going from a make-ready technician to, a regional maintenance director?
I was a maintenance technician, then I got EPA certified within a year. And then a year later, I was a maintenance supervisor. And I struggled at the maintenance supervisor level for many, many years. And I was very honored when I got a project as a project manager because I had done so many renovations as a
Mm-hmm.
maintenance supervisor, right? At large properties. And a project came up, and a manager that I used to work with recommended me. And so the company reached out and said, hey, we have this, and this is back in 2007. We have an $8 million renovation that we're doing, for a 600 unit property. Would you be interested in running that project for us?
Wow.
And so that's when I came to work for Lincoln Property Company. And so I did that. And after that job was finished, they only had 3 properties here. And to keep me with the company, they had me be a maintenance supervisor at a property, but I was also a regional maintenance director at the same time for the 3
Mm-hmm.
properties. And so, I went many years as a maintenance supervisor. In all honesty, probably because I was a female, no one wanted to put me in that role. Because even today, when you have the generation of ownership that's older, and I tell them these things are what's wrong with your building, this is what I recommend, until they get to know me, they still have a little pushback, like, that's not trust. How does she know what she's talking about? You kind of have to always constantly prove yourself. So
You, for lack of a better term, you weren't a stereotypical maintenance
right,
director.
absolutely.
I experienced something very similar when I got into my director role. Long before this white that I have here, I would sit around the table as a young director with wind companies, and this was just 10 years ago, where my peers had all been with the organization for 20, 25, 30 years. Because I know several people at my company, listen, there's a story that I will not tell, but it was a huge challenge. And Angie, I'll tell you later on the side.
Okay, great.
But one of the big challenges was they all looked at me as a young, inexperienced person. And I'm not equating that to the difference between male and female, but I understand that I can relate on to some degree being in the room and being with owners as a young professional in my role with plenty of experience. I mean, I had 20 years of experience before I set foot in that room. So, I understand those challenges. So past is the past. Mm-hmm. What are you doing today? Me trying to get you, it was a little bit of a scheduling. What have you been doing the last couple of days? Let's start even there.
The last couple of days have been doing a due diligence. I'm currently in the process of 3 different due diligence, different process. One's towards the end. One is at the beginning, and one I'm just right in the middle of. Between site.
So I want to pause right there because there might be some listeners who don't know what a due diligence is. They may have heard it, but there is a lot to the due diligence process when an owner is either buying a property, refinancing a property, changing management. I'm on the fee managed side. So we do due diligences. Tell me a little bit, what is the due diligence process in multifamily that you kind of undertake?
Sure. Basically, from the facility side, we will set up the inspections of the units. It's nice that my company and so many companies now are on the bandwagon where we use an app, which makes it so easy because you can do it right from your phone or tablet. And you basically are inspecting every aspect of the property that your client is purchasing. And it makes the decision, depending on what you find, on whether the client purchased the property or doesn't. The majority of the time they do purchase it because, they have the OM, they have a lot of information, they visited the site already. But you're looking for anything that could cause a hiccup in the process. So basically you're ensuring that all the apartments are market ready in some form, because that's what they're purchasing. You're inspecting every exterior from roofs to landscaping to irrigation to fire sprinklers, all the amenities, the leasing office, every aspect of it. And then you're basically putting it in a very large report with your findings, and you do a summary with your recommendations on what should be done or not done. So.
Yeah, I just got back we sent a team down to Memphis, Tennessee last week to do some unit inspections. So I love now that the prop tech, it's still not amazing, but the prop tech is a lot better to be able to do a unit inspection, whether it's an annual inspection or a due diligence inspection. It's so much easier than having legal size sheets of paper with Excel spreadsheets that you gotta check boxes or do little markup. So really appreciate that level of prop tech.
And the apps have made it so much easier than the paper. Of course, you have the pictures that go along with it, and the apps will actually, if you ahead of time put in the cost of appliances and all that, it will actually generate, how much it's going to cost to get everything that we found that needed repair or replaced, depending on the age of the property, a cost for ownership, so they know, what they'll be dealing with. So
a little less time in front of the Excel spreadsheet through technology. But one of the things about technology, and we're going to go back to due diligences in a second, but one of the things I like about technology is you still need a person behind it.
Yeah.
You still need to have a skilled maintenance professional with a set of eyes and a skill set, whether that's me, a maintenance supervisor, a maintenance tech, that knows what they're looking at.
Right.
You just can't take a picture of a refrigerator and decide whether or not it needs to get replaced. I mean, some refrigerators you can, but a really skilled maintenance professional will be able to look, listen, and know, okay, this refrigerator needs to get replaced. Would you, agree with that sentiment?
Oh, I do agree. Yeah, it does take a special person. I mean, hot water tanks are one of the best ones. Condensing units, again, huge.
Yeah,
The type of system that it is, noticing whether one system is very different than another system in all the other units will really be a telling sign. And, leasing agents, they're working what they're good at, but you can't just use anybody to do these inspections. It just doesn't work that way because they
right.
have to be able to recognize, has to be someone with experience that would recognize when something's not quite right.
Correct. Correct.
Because if you don't find it and your client purchases it and then you find some issue, it just doesn't look good for your company, you know.
So, outside of unit inspections, what are some of the other things that you specifically are looking at? I know we could probably create a list of the things that I would look at versus the things that you look at, and what are some of your really want to dig into items that you're looking at for a due diligence, or is it change from depending on the
Um,
asset?
no, the basics is, the interior, exterior amenities that we do as a company, but I also invite vendors to come. I have a roofer, because we are generalists, you know,
Hmm.
everyone, in the multifamily maintenance industry, the majority of them are generalists. We're not an expert at HVAC. We're not an expert at plumbing or electrical, but we can get by on doing it on and taking care of someone's apartment. But you need, a roofing company to tell you, is the flashing correct? Is there a drip edge? How many layers of roofing shingles are on the roof,
Right.
right? On chimneys, the chase caps, what shape are they in? Is there any hail damage up there? Different things, the age of the roof, any wind damage. So those things for the roof is very important. And then fire sprinkler, depending on what year the property was built. It may just have a fire alarm or it may just have fire extinguishers, right?
Right.
But you still want someone to look because, fire extinguishers, you have the annual, but then you have every 5-6 years,
Right.
every, 12, so you need to know if that property is 6 years old and they've never done their 5-year on those fire extinguishers. That's a cost that you've now got to put in a budget to tell your client. So if you didn't find that out and then the fire marshal comes and says, hey, this is an annual inspection, these are overdue, then there's another cost that you didn't think about. And so those are important. Landscaping, ponds, pumps, things like that. Swimming pools are big. We do
Definitely.
those.
Yeah.
If we see something that's a red flag where we might think there might be a leak, or you have water line tile, if they didn't keep the water level low during winter, you can call out a vendor during the due diligence, ask them to give you a bid for replacing that or fixing that. So roofs, fire sprinkler, and alarm, and pest control is a big one. Termite inspections is another vendor you would use. So sometimes we'll have a GC come with us if it's a vintage 80s property.
Yeah,
So
we're gonna dive into that in a little bit. I
yeah,
want to dive into
so that way you already have a number for any wood rot, or if you see any drainage problems, you will ask a landscaper or maybe even a foundation company to come out and take a look during those times. And so there's decisions that are made then.
So I have a lot of mid-rise and high-rise buildings. I've worked in a lot of mid-rise and high-rise buildings, so I pretty much always bring my elevator consultant almost every single time.
You find out who the manufacturer is. Otis, is it Kone? That's the person you want to come out. Also, you'll need an HVAC company if it has boilers and chillers.
Yeah,
because again, our maintenance team members are generalists. They're not HVAC specialists. They can understand how the chiller and the boilers work, but they're not necessarily the one that can make or qualified to make repairs on them.
Angie, isn't your favorite? You have like 2 days to do all the things that we just said. Or do you get a little bit more time? Do the folks at Willowbridge get you more time than 2 or 3 days?
And I, what I like to tell, the buyer to explain to the seller is 2 days for 200 units you can get through, but we've got one coming up that's I believe 346, but it's townhouses,
Wow.
right? And apartments mixed in. So the exteriors of it, one section's 2007, the other is 2017 and 20 through 2019 being built. But all together, between detached garages, right, carports, the townhouses, and the apartment buildings, there's going to be 43 structures we need to evaluate, right? So, and they only wanted to give us 2 days. So, yeah, that's not enough time.
Time. We need, yeah, we
Yeah.
need time. We need
And
as much
I
time as
explain it
possible.
to the buyer is, how thorough do you want us to be for you spending 48 million, 87 million? You know, I mean, it's up to you. We can do it in 2 days, but
But you're only going
you're,
to get 2 days of work.
yes, right. You know, I mean, because it's realistic. So, yeah.
What are some of the craziest things that you've seen? You know, we've all done apartment inspections, but
Yes.
that's that aside. What kind of crazy are there any crazy things that you've ever seen when you've been walking a property?
A chicken inside of a crate in an apartment. They kept it for eggs. I've never seen a chicken in a crate in an apartment.
I like, you know, I on multiple Facebook groups and multiple apartment maintenance LinkedIn groups, and you always see these really interesting repairs and how people fix things with,
Yes.
you know, everyday objects. And I always just laughed, and I was always like, those are one-offs. That doesn't happen in real life. And I was at a property the other day where I was walking up a large concrete staircase, and a large chunk of the metal railing was gone for whatever reason. The maintenance team there had taken the 2-inch hoses from their shop vac and basically
that's pretty
created.
good.
Oh, I have a picture of it. I will post it after. I will post it.
Great.
After this episode gets released on my socials. But I was like, oh, this stuff does happen in real life. You know, it's not just bubblegum and duct tape. It's people actually use bubblegum and duct tape.
Well, I'll tell you what, when Flex Seal came out.
Oh, it's my favorite.
You know, I've seen it used to repair fiberglass bathtub that had a huge hole in it.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what did they say when they did? They said, just don't step on that part of the tub.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I've seen it used. I am not a sponsor. I am not endorsing. I have used it. There are many uses for Flex Seal.
Yeah.
Either
and
the
it'll
spray
tell you
or
what
the tape.
The appropriate uses are for it.
Yeah, to fix roof flashing or sealant joints on a asphalt roof. That's not what it's made for. But I did walk up to a roof one time that was a sea of, I can only imagine how many rolls of it that they used to seal up a 25-year-old asphalt shingle roof that the seams had all busted on. It was just some of the things that we see. What you have another one? Chickens. I've seen chickens. I think we've all seen chickens.
I was shocked at the chicken. I was very surprised. I think the biggest thing now is it's always shocking when you find out how some people live. Yeah. You know, and what the condition of their apartment is. But you know, it's been a long while since I've been in units on a day-to-day basis. So yeah. Man, there's some crazy stuff out there.
So we are going to take a very quick break.
Sure.
But when we get back, you were throwing out a lot of ages of properties, and I wrote down 80s vintage. And I want to explore that topic a little bit when we get back after this quick break.
Okay.
So before the break, Angie, you were throwing out a lot of numbers. You were throwing out 80s vintage and talked about buildings from 2007 and 2012 or some of the years that you were throwing out. I'm interested to hear from all the inspections. I know the answer on my end. I started in this business managing buildings that were over 100 years old. And so I've seen every vintage from actually 1890 and every construction
Right.
style from 1890 in New York City all the way through a property that I'm building today
Right.
my organization's building today in Princeton, New Jersey. What are you seeing when you're out doing these? And let's start with that 80s vintage that, I'm a child of the 80s myself. So
yeah, the word vintage has got to be something from marketing. Another
Definitely
word
is.
for an older property. It reminds me of the term vegan leather, which someone made up to make people feel good about buying vinyl, which is what the shoes are. If they say our shoes are vegan leather, I want to tell everyone they're vinyl.
It's vinyl. Yeah.
It's vinyl.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, the 80s vintage, you have a lot of people now, because most of the 90s, early 2000 assets have probably gone through a lot of renovations, but people are buying them the more 80s decade of properties that are going to have more extensive exterior renovation to go along with interior renovations, right? Because everybody wants to keep up with the Joneses. Even economic status of residents. They want to have granite countertops and things like that. So.
Yeah.
The biggest issue that I'm seeing is everyone wants to renovate the units because that drives revenue, right?
Right.
And then, painting, wood rot, but some of the infrastructure, the plumbing, the electrical, things like that, gets ignored. And that creates a lot of headaches for the maintenance team.
The things that can't be seen.
Right, 100%.
The things that are very hard to see when you're doing we were talking about due diligences before the break.
Yeah.
When you're doing a due diligence, you don't know how thick the walls of the sewer lines are.
Right.
You don't know if all of the wiring is brittle or still pliable. In some cases, you don't even know if it's stranded or solid.
Right.
Without opening up things, which most of us don't do.
Right. They usually don't allow you to, yeah.
Yeah, they usually don't allow us to actually look at the things that we need to look at.
Right.
Unfortunately.
Well, and even with outlets over time, the metal inside that holds the plug in gets worn out from people plugging stuff in and out of it. So it won't even hold the plug anymore. So it's got a terrible connection, and you can't really tell that from a due diligence perspective because you're going into occupied homes and whatnot. So, it's just the plumbing is one of the bigger ones because many properties would still have the cast iron metal.
I experience that all the time within my affordable house, my much older affordable housing stock, lots of cast iron.
Yeah. And buyers just don't want to replace that because it doesn't drive rent. It doesn't create a return on their dollar. So it's harder to get those things done. So the maintenance team ends up with more maintenance requests, things like that. You go to snake a drain and the snake pokes a hole in the side of the cast iron because it's so thin from all the different Drainos, drain cleaners, all the acid drain cleaners that everybody just loved because it cleared a drain really quick, but it also took a lot of metal with it. Right. So, there's just different aspects of that make it challenging.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest challenges. I think on every single inspection, due diligence, new property takeover I do, the first question I ask is, what's your biggest work order?
Right.
And without a doubt, I would say 98 out of 100 times I've asked that question. Oh, plumbing.
Yeah.
And yes, there is a lot of plumbing in all of our apartments. You have sinks and dishwashers and garbage disposals and tubs. And, so there's a lot of plumbing fixtures, more plumbing fixtures than anything else.
Right.
But then when you start peeling back that layer from that initial question, it's the plumbing. Well, what is it? Oh, it's the toilets. Oh, okay. So now we have a stack problem or we have a vent problem. And I found, and it's very hard to learn that from work orders. We're getting there with some, prop tech work order management systems. It's a little bit easier to dive into that. But what I'm finding to really quantify that is hard at a property takeover. It's really easy when you've been managing the property or you own the property for 6 months in a year and you're putting it in your year two capital budget. And everyone
Right.
looks at you and says, well, why didn't you tell us?
Yeah.
Because I didn't know,
Yeah.
I know now. And a lot of times it's exponentially more expensive to fix it on a onesie twosie basis,
Right.
as opposed to, hey, we're going to rip out an entire stack,
Right.
get this all replaced and move on.
Yep.
You agree? Is that what you're seeing too? Or is that just me in my little world?
That's the way most people handling it, just that same way. And I've seen it from, and it's the mid-rise buildings, the historic renovations that scare me the most.
Mm-hmm.
Because at least with garden style, you have a pretty good idea of where the water main comes into a building. It'll be in someone's water closet somewhere in one of the apartments, most likely. So you have an idea of what that's like. You can see that when you inspect the apartments. But it's really tough in the mid-high rise to know if they ever replaced any of the plumbing inside the walls that you can't see.
Yeah. Plus, in a mid or a high-rise scenario, it's affecting that one failure is not ever just affecting one unit. I've never had a failure in a mid or a high-rise building of a plumbing system where I was like, oh, it was just this unit.
Yeah.
In a townhouse or a townhome,
or even garden flats, even garden stories, even if it's the top, it's going to affect 2 apartments below, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, you're looking mid-rise, high-rise. It could be 9 apartments. It could, depending on how long it took for the response to get the shut off. If it's frozen pipes, it's different. And that's been a big thing lately also, with the unseen. So that's why we really have a fire sprinkler company come and take a look to see if, the wet system or the glycol, you have the new UL glycol that everybody has to be using since 2022. That's creating a lot of financial burdens for properties. If your glycol test diluted and you have to replace it with a premixed UL rated glycol, right? And we just had a property priced at $60,000, it's not cheap. So those are all the things that you've got to try to figure out. I like due diligence because it's like a puzzle to me. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like a video game almost. So I enjoy the investigative part of it. So yeah.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. I really like that myself. I like being the expert on, while we were talking about being generalists, hey, at the time, I'm the closest thing to an expert you're going to get.
Right?
Because I'm such a generalist, as little sense as that makes. I'm the expert because I'm the generalist.
Yeah.
And, many times you're right. And you said it earlier, a strong assessment by somebody in the facilities role that knows not just what the cost of things are, but really what the long-term ramifications are. Like, if you go back to our plumbing example, like, hey, I think that there's a problem with the plumbing system, and this can cost you on par $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 a year.
Right.
After you purchase it. Is that the risk? Is that a risk you're worth to take? I've been on deals where I'd like to think it was just my opinion that may have killed that deal.
Yeah.
Just because of the information that we're able to glean and our, years of experience. And that's why it's so important for maintenance professionals to be on site and not take over property sight unseen, which unfortunately I've had the privilege of experiencing that as well. And that's probably a conversation for another day.
Right.
But, we talked about old. What are some of the things that you're seeing in new construction, and what are you seeing with new construction stock? How does it compare to the old? I saw a refrigerator last week, Angie. While I was in Graceland. I said earlier I was in Memphis, Tennessee.
Right.
So I did actually go to Graceland, and I saw Elvis's original refrigerator, and I was with 3 other maintenance professionals that I worked with.
Right.
And I looked at them and and that refrigerator was from 1968. And I turned to them and I said, how much you want to bet it still works?
Oh, 100% it does.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
when we talk about new construction, there's a huge difference in the
Right.
materials, in the time to build. What are some of the things you're seeing? Because you've seen new construction,
Right.
you know.
But you have to remember Elvis's refrigerator probably costs as much to power that as your whole kitchen appliances nowadays, right?
Yes, but
Because
Elvis also
everything,
got a lot of use out of his refrigerator.
yes,
He was always entertaining and he
yep,
liked to eat. So
yes,
there was a lot of usage on that refrigerator
yep,
too.
yep. So, well, obviously appliances have been a challenge because to meet all of the electrical requirements, the energy saving requirements, hot water tanks are another one. Um, you know, old ACs from the 70s will outlive all of us. I'm sure of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they don't have control boards like the new ACs do. Some of the biggest concerns, though, with new construction is I haven't seen a new construction project in the last 10 years that doesn't have some kind of envelope water leak, whether it's
Yeah.
windows, or somewhere up on the roof. It could be drainage,
Do you think that's the products though, or do you think that is the builders? Because I have the same experience.
I think it's a combination of things. I think you had a lot of skilled labor people during the pandemic retire, right? Everybody in their late 60s that was still working said, you know what, I'm not going back to work. So you have a lot of new labor in construction, that haven't been doing siding very long, that haven't been doing the HVAC very long. You also have builders who, to create a profit, will cut corners. I mean, that's always been there. I think a lot of it, though, is you have a lot of young architects and engineers designing things, trying to use up as much rentable space as possible, and these different, again, keeping up with the Joneses. This builder built this fabulous podium building with these great outdoor patios, but there's an apartment underneath that patio below the penthouse. And then all of a sudden, there's some kind of patio glass door problem, leaking, into the unit below because the tub under the patio wasn't installed correctly. Or it could be the architect didn't draw it up correctly, right? Or they used the wrong material. So it's a perfect storm kind of situation where you have people who have been doing it for a long time aren't there anymore to give the advice. And then you have so much product that's being built everywhere. Even with the economy, I'm still surprised at how much people are still buying.
Yeah.
People are still building.
We have a major housing shortage in this country, and
yeah,
I mean, there's tons of reports on how much housing is needed over the next 10, 15 years. We're not going to be able to staff it, but it needs to get built because we do have a massive housing shortage. And
from the time they break ground to the time people move in, you're looking at on average 18 months.
18 months, yeah.
And that's a big building in 18 months. So, it's a lot of things. There's not enough inspectors for cities because cities have to, everybody works on a budget, Yeah. I mean, that's the reality, and so there's not enough of them to go around. So how much are they really checking when people are building the buildings, So it's just, it's a culmination of many factors. I've had a product, a very well known name in the window and door industry. And it was a design failure on this new product that they had that, that the builder put in this property, so that created a huge issue.
I think those things are going to happen, but I think that you're right. It is the laborers, it is, the labor skill issues, which I've talked about, multiple times. It's not just affecting the apartment industry, it's affecting new construction,
right?
It's affecting our vendors and our suppliers. There's so many different due to that shortage of skilled labor.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you tell you in the audience a quick funny story. I was once sitting at a page turn with an architect on a new construction project, and the owner turned to me and said, "Oh, Chris, what do you think about the layout?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm totally fine with it, but we're going to have to roll out the 2-yard compactor bins for the trash directly through the center of the lobby and take it out to the trash corral." Now, this was a page turn, right? So at this point, for those of you that have never been through a page turn, this is kind of like the final step before the plans get approved by ownership in the city, right? This is kind of like a last looks situation just before you walk out the door. And the architect looked at me and said, "Well, I'd have to redesign the entire building." And I said, "That's not my," I was like, I was asked the question. I have no problem with the trash, the 2-yard smelly trash containers rolling right out the middle of this beautiful market rate building that you're building twice a day, 5 days a week. That's not a problem with me. And the owner said, "We're going to redesign the building." And 48 hours later, I got another design set after I was told it couldn't be done, that had the trash room where it should be, on the rear of the building with, double doors that you could take the trash out. And it wasn't rolling through the lobby of the building on a regular basis. But I think there's part of that too is the architects and engineers are no longer multifamily engineers anymore and architects, right? Yeah. They're just architects. There used to be a niche of architects and engineers, but now there's fewer and fewer of them as well. So they're doing commercial, they're doing retail, they're doing single family homes, and they're doing multifamily. Those are a lot of different things to juggle and, best practices to know, because a best practice for me in multifamily might not be a best practice for a commercial building.
Right.
Or retail or warehouse. Yeah. So I think that's a really good point that you made there. I think there's a professional side of this too, and not just the laborers.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And some of it's design flaw where you'll have your architect and the engineering firm that are designing the building in Minneapolis or in Dallas.
Right.
The weather's quite different. So, there's challenges to that too. We've seen a lot of with this extreme weather, with wet system fire sprinklers busting, just last year and the year before. It's been so rare that this would happen 2 years in a row, but 2 years in a row below 20-degree weather for multiple days with extreme winds. Will wreak havoc on things, and so, you have those things where you're now meeting new codes where you've got to have a fire sprinkler on a patio, but they want to use a wet system, which is just regular water and not an antifreeze system, and so they're building soffits, but they're not putting a way for the heat to get into the soffit, or they're putting the insulation not up against the outside wall, but up against the apartment wall. You just find the wildest things.
You do.
So,
and it's hard to, it's hard to encapsulate all of that because sometimes I don't know it until I see it.
Yeah.
I talked a little bit earlier about page turns, but there's plenty of times where buildings have been going up.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you may have an example of this as well, but I didn't see it on the plans.
Yeah.
I walked up on the roof and there was 75 condensers on the roof. And the first thing I thought was, where's my water source to clean them?
Where's your hose bib? Absolutely.
Right. Where's my hose bib? And they went, "Oh, well, it wasn't on the plans and you didn't catch it." And I said, "But you put 75 AC units. There's a lot of people that have a lot more education behind those plans and a lot more smarts than I do." Nobody asked the question until we were 3/4 of the way through construction.
Right.
Of how are we going to clean all this equipment that we put up there?
Yes.
Can you give me an example of something that, you just didn't catch or nobody caught and when you walked into a site?
I would have to say that it was a package room where they were putting up a package system, but they just put a half wall in, right? Instead of a full wall. Nobody thought that people might scale that wall to take other people's stuff, so that's one.
But it looked good on the elevation
It
drawings.
should, and it looked pretty with the finishes. It looked great, So a lot of things like that. You'll see a lot of it with cabinet drawers still, where one drawer won't pull out because the stove handle, is in the way now, where the stove sticks out from the system too far. So you can't really put anything in that drawer. So
Yeah. And it's interesting because a lot of architects use a lot of the same software, and they use that same 30-inch box, but it's really not 30 inches. It's 31 and a half.
Right.
That they're not accounting for, or if the outlets aren't put in correctly, and you have to tuck it out a little bit more. So the interesting things that we see.
A mini fridge that is within 2 feet of the refrigerator.
Yes.
I've seen that many times. So different stuff like that, but for sure.
So what are some of the things that our maintenance professionals at any level can help combat some of these things? How could they learn more and be those generalists that we need that you and I need in the future, basically, or that we need now so much in this industry, to make sure that we're doing the right things during a rehab or doing the right things during construction?
I think the biggest thing is diversity. Never stay at a property too long. Once you've learned everything you've learned about the products and the materials at that property, you should really ask within your company, whether to go to a newer or an older property. Everybody wants the brand new Class A stuff, but what you will really learn from is some of the older properties, on how to solve problems and things like that. So it's really, if you have a chance, if another sister site needs help, volunteer to help, because you're going to learn something there. That's the one thing I love about this industry is when you think you've seen it all, you haven't. It's just like that due diligence. It's always a challenge. It's always a puzzle that you've got to solve. So that's the biggest thing, is to make sure that you're always learning.
For me,
diversify your knowledge.
Yeah, for my diversification, I always like to tell people, if you have the opportunity to go to a different style, not just age.
Yeah.
Whether if you've never worked in a townhome community, try to work at a townhome community.
Right.
If you have the opportunity to work at a mid-rise, even a high-rise, you learn. I felt like I was at college when I worked in that high-rise building.
Oh, yeah.
And I've managed several high-rises because there's so many intricate pieces. I like to say I've managed almost every single style.
Right.
And that, I think, that diversity was really important to me in my career growth. And I've seen it be to many others too. So it's not just age.
It's the unit type. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. And to your point that you said a little bit ago, Angie, it's also about, geographic location. Right. Properties, I hear from my friends in California, and they kind of laugh at some of the things that I talk about. And then they bring up, things, and I'm just like, wait, you don't use that? Or like, oh no, this is California. Like, it's either against the law in California or because of the weather. They don't need that one thing. They don't need expansion tanks on their water heaters, or they don't need, dehumidifiers like we do. Right. I'm just like, cool. Yeah. So it's a much different world. So it's also geographic location 100%.
As well. But that's the biggest thing. If you want to get to a position like mine, is diversity. You have to be able to solve problems.
Yes.
And you can only do that through knowledge and experience.
Excellent. So Angie, as we wind down here, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. It's always a pleasure talking to you. Definitely would like to have you on again. I know a topic that we didn't get to go into too much today, but I definitely want to dive into in the future is preventive maintenance.
Yes.
Especially for, you were talking a little bit earlier about the cast iron pipes and residents using the wrong products. I think preventive maintenance is one aspect of that, but I think there's also a resident knowledge aspect that, definitely want to talk to you more about in the future. Is there anything that you want to share with my audience today as we wrap up? Any closing stories or anything that you have going on? Or
Well, I tell you what, the thing that I am on my soapbox about right now is maintenance is the face of your company. Anyone who's going to watch this podcast and isn't of the maintenance department, they're just in multifamily in general, that your maintenance techs, your groundskeepers are the face of your company now. We really need to teach them great customer service skills to keep our residents right, and good leadership so that when they do come up for a promotion, they're successful. Yes. Because we tend to, again, in the past, we've always promoted people who are great at fixing things, but they're not always great at managing people. Yeah. And we don't want to promote someone when they're not ready, because we want them to be successful. Nobody wants to promote someone and have them fail. So some of those things, I hope people realize now how important maintenance is to the customer service experience at properties, because everyone is, it's an app to put in a work order almost guaranteed anymore with, apartment complexes that residents live in and stuff. So it's just extremely important that we give our maintenance teams the boots on the ground, the high fives that they deserve, because
the appreciation.
They are toting the load for sure.
Yes, so. with aging product.
Yes.
With manufacturer defect, with construction
and new construction
defects,
with some water leak defects or whatever,
Yeah. Sometimes I feel my new construction properties are a lot more work than my 50, 60-year-old properties.
Yeah. I mean, all of a sudden, the electrical panel in the apartment next door controls everything in this apartment, but it's not in the right apartment. I mean, there's things that you go to turn off a breaker and you're like, why is nothing going on? I've had hot water, a PEX hot water line. It was blue though, hooked up to a toilet. So every time you flush the toilet, the tank filled up with steaming hot water. Okay. Because they got the lines crossed to the toilet supply,
Just when you think you've seen everything, you see something else.
Yeah.
That's what I like to say.
Yes.
So Angie Drysdale, thank you so much for your time today. It was great talking to you, and I look forward to talking to you more in the very near future.
Well, Chris, it was my pleasure, for sure. I always enjoyed it. It's a lot of fun.
Thank you so much. So thank you all for joining Angie and I for another episode of Beyond the Work, Tales in Multifamily Maintenance, powered by the Multifamily Media Network. Please feel free to like, subscribe, and share this podcast as well as any other podcast on the Multifamily Media Network. Thank you all, and talk to you again soon.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me for this episode. No matter how long you've been in our industry or what position you have at your company or your community, everyone has a maintenance story to tell. Go to www.multifamilymedianetwork.com and leave me a voice message, or share your information and we can tell your tale together on a future episode. Please check out our sponsors and like, subscribe, and follow to this podcast or video, and join the Multifamily Media News Network newsletter for upcoming shows and blogs from me and the other great hosts on our network. Our stories all connect us. See you for the next chapter.